The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ashley Gatewood, the Communications and Marketing Manager at CFRE International, and I'm joined today by my colleague Paul Cavazos, our Certification Manager. We also have two CFREs, Amy Bossi and Luigi Ronchi, with us today, and I will introduce them in several minutes. Just a bit of housekeeping while we get started. The webinar is being recorded, and I will email a link to the recording to you within 24 hours. All lines are muted, and we do ask that you send us any questions you have through the question pane on the GoToWebinar interface. We will do our best to answer those questions on the back end, and we'll also stop periodically to address some of them during the webinar. We do have one person answering all the questions, so please be patient. We also ask that you do not send any questions that are around a very specific situation. So for instance, if you say, I went to the AFP Ottawa conference in 2017, how many education points is that? That's something that we would not be able to answer during this webinar because it would take a little bit of follow-up. But please do feel free to send us your general questions. I'm going to get us started with some FAQs. The first is the application is $875 US at the regular rate, and the discounted rate is $700 US if you are the member of a participating organization. Presentations for your employers do not count towards your continuing education points. I'm going to reference today the test content outline, the glossary, and the candidate handbook. All of those are available at CFRE.org, and I will also link to them from the follow-up email that I will send at the conclusion of the webinar. And this webinar does count for one continuing education point in the non-fundraising education section. So who is SIA Free International? We are an independent nonprofit certifying body, and we're the only internationally recognized accredited credential for fundraising professionals. We work with 30 participating organizations, and those include AFP, AHP, NATO, the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, Habitat for Humanity International, etc. So if you are a member of any of those organizations, that will give you that discount towards your CFRE initial application fee as well as your recertification fee. There are currently over 6,700 CFREs in 25 countries, and we are governed by current CFREs, and our board is elected by our CFRE certificants. So we'll talk now about why someone might pursue certification. Number one is confidence. CFRE certification is a reflection of your professional competence, and it confirms your knowledge of standards for fundraising best practice, accountability, and ethical conduct. And that ties in really closely with credibility. CFRE certification serves as an impartial third-party validation of your knowledge and experience against international standards in philanthropy. And for that reason, that's why it adds to your credibility as a fundraising professional and sets you apart from others. Career advancement, we hear a lot about this from people who are CFREs and tell us that once they got their CFRE, they were headhunted, or they found that they had a much better callback rate when applying for new positions. It really does matter out there in the hiring process for sure. In fact, 89% of CFREs tell us that earning their CFRE has led to enhanced professional opportunities. Commitment, we know everybody on this call knows that we have a lot of turnover in the fundraising profession. Earning your CFRE demonstrates your commitment that you are in this for the long term. Recognition. So as a CFRE, you can expect increased recognition from your colleagues and peers, with 94% of CFREs telling us that they have experienced enhanced credibility with employers and or clients. And this last one here, personal satisfaction, is quite important. 99% of CFREs have told us in our 2018 survey that they had tremendous personal satisfaction from earning the CFRE. And I think that's especially true for people who consider themselves to be lifelong learners. If you are a lifelong learner and a fundraising professional, pursuing your CFRE is really a natural next step. We'll now hear from two CFREs. Both are currently working as consultants, but I'd like to emphasize that being a CFRE has tremendous benefits, whether you are a consultant or you're working directly inside a nonprofit organization. I'll introduce our first CFRE joining us today. It's Amy Bossy of St. Louis, Missouri in the US. She's an independent fundraising consultant who has worked with numerous local nonprofits in various roles to improve their operations and expand their revenue. Her experience covers everything from direct mail to major gifts for nonprofits in the St. Louis region and beyond. And I'll now turn it over to Amy, who will share with us what motivated her to become a CFRE.
Thank you. So I definitely believe the certification validates my career as a fundraiser and definitely brings forth some accountability. I was on the board of the AFP chapter, and one of the other board members was outed for and actually prosecuted for embezzling money. And I know that we in this field definitely have a spotlight shown on us because essentially we are, we're not giving away anything. We're asking people for their resources and giving them nothing. So we definitely are set to a higher standard in this industry. And I think having my CFRE accreditation puts me to, shows that I'm definitely adhering to that higher standard. All of my mentors are CFREs. And when I was first thinking about getting this accreditation, I looked to them and said, everyone who I really think is doing well in this career has that. So there must be something to it. I definitely stand out in hiring. It endorses me to my clients. It just is that extra thing that says, wow, she must really know what she's doing. And it helps me maintain my career in fundraising, nonprofit management with the continuing education. For me, it was just the logical next step. Everyone, as I mentioned, that I looked up to was doing it. I remember being at a conference and then the people getting their ACFRE were being tested, and then they were getting the medals put around their neck at the conference, at the keynote, and I was just in awe and thinking, that's going to be me someday. I want to have that level of knowledge, and I want to receive that recognition. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Amy. And now I'd like to introduce our second CFRE on the call. Luigi Ronchi is a campaign manager in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. And he works at Face-to-Face Direct Consulting, managing the Canuck Place Children's Hospice account. In this role, Luigi is responsible for the development, coordination, and leadership of public fundraising campaigns, marketing, and corporate partnerships. Luigi is originally from Argentina, where he started his fundraising career developing corporate partnerships and special events, including an international sporting event that was a qualifier for the Olympic Games. So now we will hear from Luigi about what motivated him to become a CFRE.
Hi, Ashley. So again, as Amy was saying, the first thing that motivated me to pursue the designation was that professional and personal growth. We are dealing with a lot of great people in our community that are showing their support for the causes that we advocate, and I felt like attaining the CFRE was also a way to show my professional commitment towards the industry and towards the organizations that we serve. I also felt it was a great advantage when looking for jobs or dealing with clients, knowing that I would gain the recognition and respect by my commitment and knowledge. In my particular role, I have a staff of fundraisers that I manage. So I felt like having a CFRE was also a sign of better leadership in managing my fundraising staff and training them and encouraging them to grow professionally, and also to hold an international credential. I'm recognized by peers in other industries as fundraisers We are involved in relationships with people from other sectors. Some of them are highly regulated and they all hold their credentials in very high regard. So having my own credential was a very meaningful achievement for me.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Luigi. We will hear from Amy and Luigi just a little bit later in the presentation. And now I'm going to go over the SIA Free certification process at a high level. So if you've ever wondered what the steps are, definitely bring your attention to this screen here. The first step is to start your application at cfre.org if you have not done that yet, and we'll get into that in a minute about how to approach that. You will enter your information, select a test window for when you want to sit for the exam, double check your application, and then you submit and pay. And that's really important. So it is free to start your application. You are only going to pay when you feel ready to submit. Then your next step, which is actually our next step, is our SIA Free staff will review your application. And then once it's approved, you'll receive an email and instructions on how to schedule your exam. Then you'll sit for the exam at your nearest testing center, and I assure you that our testing partner, Pearson VUE, has testing centers all over the place, all over the world. There is very likely to be one in a convenient location to you. And then once you pass your exam, you are a CFRE, and you recertify every 3 years to stay current with the credential. So we're going to look at the application requirements here. The first piece of this is education, in which we require 80 points. And people think, okay, well, what's a point? Well, 1 point is 1 hour of time in instruction. So if I attend a 4-hour bequest workshop, that's going to be 4 points. We need to always subtract out breaks. So if I'm on a 4-hour course and we have a 30-minute morning tea break, coffee break, I need to subtract that out, and it might actually be 3.5 hours. The points for education need to be earned within the past 5 years. And we do have an exception to that, which is the academic degree, and that can exceed the 5-year time frame, and that can be from any year in any major. So for instance, I have an English degree from 2002, that would count. The majority of your points are likely to come from attending conferences, workshops, seminars, and webinars. And we also give points if you present. So while attending earns you 1 point per hour, presenting earns you 2 points per hour. So that can be a great prompt if you've been thinking, okay, I'd really like to start presenting. It can be a great time to make a go of it, because then you can start earning those points more quickly. You are also able to earn points for authoring articles or books. However, they cannot be self-published. We offer a couple of other ways to earn those education points, and one of them is service learning, which is our term for volunteering, and you can earn up to 10 points via that way. So for instance, general volunteer service, 1 point per year per organization. So if I've been volunteering at my local animal shelter for the last 4 years, I'm going to get 4 points. The volunteer leadership is 2 points per year per organization that I've served on a board or committee. And as I said, that is up to 10 points total in that section. The next piece is non-fundraising related courses, which we will also accept up to 10 points for. These are important because we recognize that you may go on a course that may not have fundraising in the title or be fundraising focused, but really help you to have a stronger fundraising department and outcomes. So let's say I go on a course about how to better manage Generation Y in the workplace. That's going to give me points. If you go on project management courses, technology courses, all of those good things, that will count. But, if you go on a swimming course or something like that, obviously that's really outside the scope of work. That was a question I did have posed to me a couple weeks ago. So that's not the kind of thing that we would count towards this. We have a test content outline, which I mentioned on the second slide today. That is available on our website, and that shows you all of the topics that are covered on the CFRE exam. If you're wondering if something is going to count in that fundraising bucket for your education, see if it ladders up to something on that test content outline. And the reason why we want it to is because that's what's going to prepare you for the exam best. You will need to document the exact amount of time that you spend in a class, a conference, or a seminar. And that, again, is, as I mentioned before, so subtracting out lunch, subtracting out networking breaks, cocktail receptions, that kind of a thing. And then you'll want to ask yourself, was this a presentation related to my employment requirements? And by that, I mean, if you give a 2-hour training to your board on making thank you calls to donors, that's not going to count because that's part of your normal job. The professional practice piece is 36 points. 1 month of paid employment equals 1 point. So if you've been in a volunteer fundraising role for the last 5 years, unfortunately, that wouldn't count. It does need to be paid professional employment. And at least 50% of those duties must be fundraising. So if I have a job where I'm fundraising 50% of the time and I'm doing PR 50% of the time for my organization, that's going to be fine. But if I'm working part-time and I am working 50% on PR and 50% on fundraising, that's not going to be ample. I will need to have 100% of my duties related to fundraising. Professional performance, this is your performance on the job. We do require 55 points and they need to have been earned in the last 5 years. You can earn these through management projects, communications projects, and we do have examples on our website of what those projects look like. So for instance, a communications project could be, we did a huge overhaul of our e-newsletter, completely rethought it, and now we're bringing in 22% more donations via the e-newsletter in 2019 versus 2018. However, if you're just sending your e-newsletter out every Friday, just as you do, that's not a project because that is not a discrete thing that you did, right? That's part of your normal job. And then we have the actual funds raised. So 1 point equals 25,000 US dollars. And that is always calculated to US dollars, which may seem unusual if you're working in another country, but that's what keeps the standard for CFRE. So we're not saying, okay, well, it's this standard in Singaporean dollars, and it's this standard in Australian dollars, and it's this standard in Canadian dollars. We do have that one standard. And when we look at the actual funds raised, what we're looking at is the fundraising team. So if you send out a really great direct mail piece and it brings in $400,000, it's impossible for you to say, well, I'm responsible for $250,000 of that, right? You just can't parse that out necessarily. So that's why we do look at it from that team standpoint. If you haven't started your application yet, have a look at the screen here. I'm going to show you where to go. If you look up at the top, you'll see that red bar where it says login and then my CFRE. Go ahead and click that, and then that's what's going to bring up the page where you can start that application at no cost. Again, you will only pay when you're ready to submit it. And we highly recommend that you start your application even if you're not fully sure that you want to become a CFRE, so that you can log the activities that you participate in. And I'll get into that in a few slides. All right, so when you start your application, you can log in and out of it as many times as you want. So if you need to go in and out of it 100 times to add in the different events that you're attending, that's completely fine. There is a calculator for each section, or I should say it calculates for you how many points you have. So as you enter all of the things that you're attending, it's going to say, you have 14 points, you have 45 points, whatever it is that you've earned. So you don't have to have your own personal calculator out and try and do that number crunching. This is a one-time cost. So when you have your initial application, you're not going to pay once to submit it and then another fee for the exam. It's just either that $875 or $700 US dollars. we have a tip here around documentation. You do need to keep your documentation from events that you've attended. That might be a registration, confirmation email, that might be your receipt for payment. If it's a webinar, you can take a screenshot of the first and the last slide. And you should be storing all of that documentation someplace safe, and we highly recommend that you do not store it in a work email. If you are suddenly not at your job, or even if you put in your 2 or 4 weeks notice, really the last thing that you're thinking about is, oh geez, I better be sure to get all that CFRE stuff out of this email. Use your Gmail, Yahoo, whatever your personal email is. Start a folder, call it CFRE proof, and keep everything there. Your future self will thank you for sure. A few application tips here. Do update your application a little bit at a time. Let's say today I'm going to go to a lunch and learn activity that's 1 hour, which equals 1 point. As soon as I'm done, I'm going to log that into my application. It's very hard to sit down, on a rainy Tuesday night and think, okay, I'm going to go get into my application and log everything I've done in the last 3 years. It's daunting, and not only that, it's really easy to miss something if you didn't keep that proof somewhere. In your CFRE account, you provide your email address and your postal address. Please keep those current. If you switch jobs and you used your work email, we can't get a hold of you if you've not updated it. So for instance, if once you're a CFRE, we're going to send you email reminders about when to recertify. That information is also inside your account and on your certificate, but life happens and gets in the way, right? So definitely keep that email address current, because we need to contact you with those kinds of reminders, and keep your postal address current as well, because when you become a CFRE, we will mail you a hard copy of the certificate, and we do not want that going to a job that you were in 3 years ago. When you're putting your application together, especially in the education section, consider adding a few extra points. You don't have to do this, but you need 80 points, and if you have 83 points, 84 points, that's fine. We do encourage that, because in the event 1 or 2 of your points somewhere doesn't count, we won't have to send your application back to you. You will have enough buffer points to cover that. And we also encourage you to not guess. Please contact us with any questions. Please do this before you submit your application. If you submit your application and we have a question and we need to send it back to you for any clarification, and you handle that point and then you resubmit it, you don't have to pay another fee to send that back to us. But the problem is we can end up ping-ponging back and forth with you on a submitted application, and then you've got to go through the trouble of resubmitting it. So ask us all of your questions up front, get everything buttoned up, and then hit submit. And we're very responsive. We're very happy to work with you. I mentioned earlier about the test windows, and these are the 2020 ones. So what this means is we have 4 test windows every year that you can sit for the exam during. So we cover every month except for December. The deadline at the front of every test window is the last day you can submit your application to sit for your exam in that window. So for instance, if I want to sit for my exam on February 3rd, I need to get my application submitted no later than January 15th. When you submit your application, you do have 1 year to sit for the exam. So if I'm going to sit for that exam in October of 2020, I may want to just go ahead and submit my application, right? Because it's ready, I've got everything I need. I just kind of want to get it over with, tick it off my to-do list, and then I've got a year to study. So that's another way to go about it. We do recommend that you speak to your boss if you feel comfortable doing so about your intention to pursue your CFRE. In our 2018 certificate survey, 52% of CFREs told us that their organization covered part or all of their initial certification fee. Some people may feel uncomfortable doing that and then be worried, okay, well, what happens if I don't pass the exam? And I've had people tell me that they cut a deal with their boss and said, look, I'm going to pay the $700 for the CFRE fee. And when I pass the exam and become a CFRE, I would like to be reimbursed. And that makes it a very reasonable request. If you're able to get that in writing, all the better. Um, why would your boss care if you become a CFRE? Well, there are many reasons, like we outlined earlier in the presentation, but it's great to set an example for people that you manage, that you are holding yourself to a higher standard, a higher bar. CFREs tell us often that while they're studying, they're learning things that they're able to just turn around and apply the next day in their job. That's really important. That's one of the reasons why people want to pursue their CFRE, because it is a prompt to study and to build out their body of knowledge. If you have professional development funds in your 2019 budget that you know are use or lose and are going to kind of hang out, you may want to speak to your boss about using them. So let's say I've got $430 that I know we're not going to, it's November 5th, right? I'm not going to use them before December 31 for anything. Speak to your boss if you might be able to use those towards your fee. Or if you're doing your 2020 budget, you may want to ask if that fee can be built into the budget there. Few fundraising professionals hold a fundraising related qualification. As I mentioned previously, there's 6,700 CFREs worldwide. This is not a credential that every person you trip over is gonna have it, right? You are gonna stand out. We are a third party validating your experience in professional development. You can add to grant applications and donor conversations that you have a CFRE on your team. We especially hear from people in healthcare fundraising that healthcare is such a heavily credentialed field, right? You go into a meeting, and if you're dealing with medical professionals, they all have a big alphabet soup behind their name, and people are really looking for that. And we also know, everybody on this call, that ethics and accountability have never been more vital. And unfortunately, we do see that with different scandals that have happened around the world. So people do have this front of mind. They do want to know that somebody has a certification, that they have held themselves to a higher standard and been validated by a third party. And with that, we are going to our first question break. And Paul Cavazos, our certification manager, is going to ask some questions that have come in.
Thank you, Ashley. So we got a couple of great questions that came in. I'll start with the most recent one, actually. So someone is asking whether or not their involvement in a team of fundraisers, whether or not they can include the full amount that was raised as part of that team effort.
And that would be a yes.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So we do encourage you, anyone who's supervising or managing a team, anyone on that team can claim those same funds. If they were responsible for one area of that, whatever funds were received, then they would list those funds. But otherwise, both the management and all the team members can list the full amount that was raised as part of that team effort. Another great question was, can individual classes from a degree program be listed in the application for credit, even if the degree itself was not completed?
Well, that's a good question, Paul. You want to take that?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. Even if you don't have the degree, be sure to list the individual classes that you're taking in that program in your application, both as fundraising and non-fundraising education. Any classes that you take as part of a degree program can be listed as an academic course, and those award 15 points per semester credit. So that's a great way to earn a bulk amount of points. Okay, so on to the next question. I just attended a conference. Do I have to list each session I attended as an individual entry?
No, you do not. And when you get into your CFRE application where it asks for the presenter's name, you can type various.
Awesome. Next question, do I need a degree to apply?
No, not at all. We have many CFREs who do not hold a formal degree.
Awesome. And next question, what happens if my application is rejected?
Yes, well, if it is rejected, it will actually go back to Paul, most likely on our certification team, who will be able to work with you and discuss what caused it to not go through. and to help you see the areas that you might need to get those extra points so that you do satisfy all of those requirements to the fullest.
That's right. And I will say we typically don't outright reject applications unless your employment is not eligible. For example, if you're not a fundraiser. So otherwise, we work with you. If you submit an application and there are some rejected items, I'll work with you to, until you can complete the deficiencies and then get you registered to sit for the exam.
And I'll also just make a small plug here as well. If you have any concerns about if your job qualifies, you can send Paul a copy of your job description, and then he'll take a look at that and be able to come back to you with a definitive answer.
Great. And I have one more question. Do I need to include supporting documentation with my application?
No, you do not need to at the time that you apply. We audit 1 out of 10 applications, and it is completely random. At that point, if you are audited, Paul will work with you one-on-one, and at that point, we will ask for that verification.
Great.
All
Thank you,
right.
Ashley.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you everyone who has been submitting questions. It's excellent. The CFRE exam, this is what's really on people's minds, and I think it's a major reason why people do not pursue their CFRE, because they are very, very terrified of the exam. The first thing I always say is don't be afraid. I will be your cheerleader on this. You are smarter, wiser, more self-disciplined, with more life experience and more work experience now than you have ever been before. So go into it with a good frame of mind. It is 200 multiple choice questions, and these questions are developed by currently working fundraising professionals. So this isn't a whole bunch of people that retired 10 years ago and are super out of touch and just think, oh, okay, I'm just going to kind of pull this question out of thin air. It's not like that at all. It's people who are currently working in this field. It's a global exam, which means that it's the same no matter where in the world you test. So if I sit for this exam in Montreal, or I sit for this exam in Miami, or I sit for this exam in Hong Kong, I'm taking the same exam. And what that means for you is that you don't have to worry about a whole bunch of local questions, right? So we're not going to say, what's the Canadian gift receipting law? Or what do you have to do in New Zealand in this situation? It's not like that. We're looking at best practices, not rote memorization of facts. So for that reason, it really is truly global in that. And I don't want you to worry at all that you need to know a whole bunch of nuances about other countries and how they work within fundraising. The score range is from 200 to 800, and 500 is the pass mark. That 500 is firm. So if you get a 495 and you call our office and you say, can you help me out? Unfortunately, we can't. We are accredited, and the reason that CFRE means so much is because we do have the same standard for everybody. So when you have those 4 letters after your name, everyone knows that you've satisfied the exact same criteria. So that 500 and above is what you will need. You have 4 hours to take the exam. I can tell you right now that is ample time for most people. Most people don't necessarily butt up against that 4-hour mark. This isn't something where at 3 hours and 58 seconds you're going to have 40 questions you haven't seen. As long as you keep yourself moving, you will find the 4 hours most likely to be quite ample. The exam is broken out into these 6 knowledge domains. So if you look at your screen here, you will see the 6 areas covered and what percentage of the exam that is. If I'm a guru on securing the gift and relationship building, I'm still going to study these, right? Because that's 49% of the exam. I don't want to get overconfident in any of these areas, but especially the areas that a large chunk of the exam is covering. As I mentioned, the test content outline, that breaks down further everything that's covered under each of these 6 areas. A lot of people don't know how to get started with studying. We do have a recording, a couple of recordings actually, of our SIA Free Exam webinar on our YouTube channel. And I would say if you're really looking for a super deep dive on the exam, to check those out. You only need to watch one because they're all relatively similar, but review the test content outline to help you get started with studying. We have a PDF on our website. Print it off, take a highlighter for everything that you think you are not comfortable answering an exam question on. What have you had experience with? What are you comfortable with? You know, you may have never done volunteer management before. Okay, well then you're going to need to devote a bit more study time to that area than somebody who 2 jobs ago was a volunteer manager for 4 years, right? So just take your experience and your comfort level into this and be very, very honest with yourself. Don't think like, oh, I could probably answer a question on that, even though I haven't done too much with it. I don't know if I should say every day, but every week. I mean, it's a common thing that people think, I really don't want to study. I'm just going to rock into the CFRE exam, and I'm sure my experience will carry me through. And that usually does not work out very well for folks. So you definitely do need to study. Like I said, this is best practices. You will learn best practices that you can begin applying to your job straight away. So not only is the studying going to help you with the CFRE exam, but it will help you perform more optimally in your professional life as well. We have a number of resources on our website to help you prepare. The first is the candidate handbook. That's really the A to Z of everything that you ever wanted to know. The test content outline, and then the resource reading list. So we have 14 books on the resource reading list, and we do not expect anyone to read all 14 of them. It's broken out so that you can see which books cover which knowledge domains, and then after you've identified through highlighting the test content outline your areas where you need to focus your study, take that over to the resource reading list, and that will help you determine the books that you need. We have a CFRE testing guide. We also have a glossary. I highly, highly recommend that you read that glossary. That is the language of the exam. So when we say donor, this is what we mean. When we say stewardship, this is what we mean. That will ensure that when you're reading the exam questions, you feel confident and you know precisely what is being asked. We do offer a practice exam. It is a subscription base. It's $59.95 US for 30 days or $99.95 US for 90 days, and that's unlimited usage. You do not have to purchase the practice exam to be successful in the CFRE exam by any means. So I don't want anybody thinking like, oh geez, now I've got to pony up $60. The practice exam is there for two purposes. One is it will show you what you don't know, and that will help you focus your study. And two, if you've never taken a computer-based exam, it will help get you a bit acclimated to that. The questions on the practice exam are not on the live exam, and we 100% do not recommend that you only use the practice exam to study. People will do that. They'll purchase the practice exam and they'll take it 50 times, and then they'll memorize all those questions. But that's not going to help them on the live exam because we're testing best practices, right? Not rote memorization of facts. So use a practice exam to identify your gaps in knowledge. It's a great tool for that, but do not lean on it as the thing that is going to necessarily fill those gaps and be the sole source of preparation that will help you sail through the exam, because it just is not designed for that. Then we also offer flashcards. These come with the subscription to the practice exam, and these, again, super useful. A lot of people really love flashcards. This is a really great way to test your knowledge as well. We have a new online community which launched in February of 2019. If you've started an application or you're a current CFRE, you have access to CFRE Central. This is amazing because you will hear from other people who have passed or not passed what they did to prepare. And it is excellent to see the books that people recommend. We have people say, you know, I used The Secrets of the CFRE exam book, which is not on our resource reading list, and I did not pass the exam. So definitely look for study tips, hear how other people are preparing. You can connect with somebody else if you want to find a virtual study buddy. It's an awesome free resource, and I definitely recommend that you have a look in there. To prepare a study plan, maybe you don't need a plan. Maybe you just kind of study when you have free time and can stick to it. But if you want to, it's great to pick days of the week in a set time to really keep yourself accountable and ensure that you don't kind of slack off, because that's easy to do, right? Things happen and it's easy for the studying to get deprioritized. You're going to know which knowledge domains require the most focus and where you're going to want to study for that. Then you'll select the books you'll read. You may want to set a page goal every week. I really like this because it helps you stay accountable. If I say I'm going to have read 50 pages a week and it's Friday and I've read 20, I think, geez, I do not want to fall behind on my studying. I need to make up the difference. This seems super obvious, to select a quiet, calm place to study, but so often that's not our house. A number of people tell us that they studied on their lunch break at work. They just closed their doors, told people don't disturb me. That can be a great way to do it, but just make sure that wherever you select to study is a place where you can have your full attention on the study materials. When you sit for the CFRE exam, you'll go to a testing center that looks like what is on your screen here. There are security cameras, there are individual testing stations, and people in the testing center will be taking a variety of exams. So it's not a CFRE testing center, right? It's through our test partner Pearson VUE. So you may have somebody in there next to you taking an architectural exam and somebody else taking one for accountants. So just know that there is a very heavy security protocol. Again, we cover all of that in the recording of the CFRE exam webinar that you can watch on our YouTube channel, and that will tell you more about what to expect when you go into the test center. So what happens after you take the exam? As soon as you finish it, it's going to come up on the screen with your score, and you will know if you have been successful or not. The testing agency gives your information to CFRE, and that information comes to us in a batch, right? So if my name is Holly and I live in California and I just finished the exam right now, that isn't being sent to CFRE immediately. They're going to take everyone, Pearson VUE is going to take everyone in the world that took the exam within a day, and then they're going to batch that information and send it to us. Why does that matter? That means that you will know that you are a CFRE before we know that you're a CFRE. And I heavily advise that you do not pass the exam and then 5 minutes later put something on LinkedIn that you're a CFRE. And only reason is because if your boss calls us and says, hey, is so-and-so a CFRE, we can't confirm that. So just wait, because once we get the information from Pearson VUE, we're going to send you an email. Once you get that email from us, that's how you know that it's hit our database and everything is good, and then you can go shout it from the rooftops. If you are not successful with the exam, we're going to send you an email about retaking it. There is a 30-day stand down period for you to retake it. There is a re-exam fee of $375 US. And sometimes people say to me, that seems like a high re-exam fee. You want to pass the first time. We want you to pass the first time. That re-exam fee really, hopefully will be a good ignition for you to study as much as you can when you sit for it the first time. After each testing window, so if you remember that slide we looked at with the 4 testing windows, 15 days after each testing window closes, all of the new CFREs will be sent their official certificate in the mail, and that certificate is perfect for framing, and there will be some framing information in there too. So once you're a CFRE, you will recertify every 3 years. As a courtesy, CFREs due for recertification are sent notice of the deadline and process for recertification to their email address of record beginning 4 months prior to the certification expiration date. But it's always the CFRE's responsibility to know the recertification due date and to recertify by that date. The recertification application is completely online, and again, you can go in and out of it as many times as you want, keep logging your information that you need. The recertification fee is $510 US or $408 US for members of participating organizations. Some people, when they take a new job, they may ask for that to be put into their contract, that their employer will cover this fee. It's very reasonable. It's only payable once every 3 years, and you know it's coming, so it will not take anyone by surprise. There is no exam required for recertification. So once you pass that initial exam, you are good. If your certification lapses and you're beyond your 6-month grace period for recertification and you wish to become a CFRE again, you will then need to sit for the exam. So definitely recertify on time so that you do not have to worry about the exam again. If you look at your screen here, you will see the points required for recertification, and again, you will earn those over the course of the 3 years. And now we will turn it back over to Amy, who will tell you a little bit about how she approached the CFRE and her CFRE process.
Like you said, I ensured that my employers, at the time I was not a consultant, knew that I had CFRE on my mind. And whenever I engaged in a new job, I made that part of my professional development plan. So I was able to get the CFRE review course and the test into the budget of the organization I worked for at the time. So they paid for it, which was excellent. And I personally, it's important to me to work for organizations that take professional development very seriously and will pay for that. So that's just my own personal thing. It took me about 3 or 4 years to fill out the application, and I don't mean to sit down at the computer and fill it out. I mean, from the time I decided that CFRE was for me, talking to mentors, I remember sitting at a roundtable discussion at an AFP event, deciding if CFRE was for me, you know, to start gathering all my information and files and making sure I had enough continuing education credits and volunteer time. I only studied 1 week, but really 1 year, and I'll tell you that story specifically in a little bit. I took the CFRE review course, which is offered through my local AFP chapter. I think it's now called the CFRE refresher course. It's a 2-day intense training, and they give you this really thick book when you sign up for the class. And then they walk you through that entire book with case studies. I believe they take you through a lot of the glossary terms and just really prepare you for the exam. They tell you what to expect during the exam. Actual CFREs instruct so they can tell you their personal experiences. And they really just remind you that it's all donor centered. If you're looking at a question and you have any, self-doubt, just think, what is donor-centered fundraising about? So that is one good takeaway. So my CFRE test experience is that I filled out my application and neglected to sign up for a testing window. So it was in my budget for professional development, and you only have that year for your test, and that year was quickly approaching. So I had to hurry up and find a time to take the test. And as that test approached, I completely forgot to study. And a week before, I was like, oh, shoot, that's coming up. So I took out my giant book and sat on my back porch with a glass of wine and flipped to the practice test in the back, and immediately walked back inside, put the wine away, and sat down at my desk and thought, I need to buckle down. So during that entire week, I just went through the book and, highlighted the terms and really thought through things that I was weak on, and went and took the test. And I was so nervous that during the test, turns out I had left my keys in the car and the car running the entire time. But luckily no one stole my car and my car didn't run out of gas. Hooray, and I passed the test. Thank you. Oh, So my big takeaways are to save all of your confirmations for continuing education and sessions. Definitely start, even if you don't intend to get your CFRE, just start your application now so that you don't decide later and then have to scramble to put all of your information together. And then update your application as you go. Don't sit down one night and just try to search through file after file and folder after folder to scramble to put it all together. And this goes for when you recertify as well. You will have a mini panic attack. And then take advantage of the resources offered by your local AFP chapter. I can't say this enough. I took the refresher course offered by them. Other people who didn't take that course, I know, studied by the flashcards and the practice tests. I know testing is a big, scary thing, especially if you haven't been to school in a while and you don't remember how to take a test. So definitely the flashcards helped because if you didn't have the book to go through and highlight, those flashcards were kind of the book kind of condensed. And then with your application, I have a mentee who was really freaking out about her application, and she was asking me questions I just couldn't answer. So I just had her call some of the folks on this call and say, hey, I have no clue what this is asking me about, or I'm not sure. Can you help me? And they were so gracious and answered all of her questions. So if you don't know, ask. Don't hesitate, please. Thank you.
Excellent. And now we'll hear from Luigi about his CFRE process.
Well, similar to Amy, when I was looking at starting my CFRE application, I realized if this is going to bring value to me as a professional, it would also bring value to my organization. So I went and I asked my boss at the time if he was willing to support my CFRE journey. And surprisingly, he was quite happy to find out that I was going to start the CFRE process. So they covered the cost of my exam and also one of the books I bought. So that was great. I was the first team member out of 50 in the agency to become certified. And then some other people now are on their way to becoming certified, which is great. The whole process took me 3 to 4 years. And I always say that the application in itself is the first milestone to achieve in becoming certified. So CFRE.org, I created an account there, and it was my hanging out digital place for a while I was gathering all the information. I was looking at what the educational points were missing. So I became strategic in attending events and professional development conferences and whatnot to get the points needed. And when I was finally ready to go, I studied about 8 weeks. I used the glossary from CFRE. I found it very helpful. And some of the books in the resource reading list were really beneficial. And of course, I used the practice exam at the end. I have read a lot of weblogs from people sharing their experience on passing and failing. I made sure I researched a lot and why people fail. And the number one reason is many of them just went for the exam without reading any book. And they were surprised that they failed at the end. So I made sure that I was prepared. And the exam, practice exam was really helpful because it helped me understand the format of the exam. So that was good. Next slide. Yeah, so my process was looking at areas where I hadn't been exposed professionally. My journey to CFRE started in Argentina, then I moved to Canada. So I was involving practices in different countries. And one of the things I had never been exposed to in my professional practice in Argentina was plan giving. And I wasn't exposed to that in Canada either. So that was really great. After the end, when I completed my CFRE, I felt like I had a more thorough knowledge on fundraising overall and not just the areas where I had experience with. And in the end, it provided me a global perspective on the profession and the industry. And who knows, I may move somewhere else next. So I'm glad I have it.
Excellent. And now Amy will talk about the benefits to her career.
I definitely can demand a higher hourly rate from my clients as a consultant. And after I passed the CFRE exam, when I was employed not as a consultant, I did earn a raise. I am part of a network of professionals dedicated to the highest standards of fundraising. I can rely on that. I do have a cohort that I belong to, and we get together once a month and talk about anything and everything related to fundraising and commiserate about, our field. And I find that is very beneficial. I have a higher consideration for leadership positions. I just joined a board locally, and I feel that, well, I know for sure that they look to me as the expert in fundraiser. I'm the president-elect now, and I'm going to chair the development committee next year. And I have more authority in my position as a consultant. They, with those letters behind my name, they really trust and know that I'm educated and have the knowledge and experience in what I'm saying to them. Thank you.
Excellent. And Luigi.
Yeah, well, my CFRE certainly enhanced my professional profile. Having those letters by my name mean a lot, not only for the body of knowledge that you acquire, but also, as Amy was pointing out, the commitment to highest standard of ethics. Again, I was able to join a network. I found my tribe within the industry. I've created more lasting relationship with peers through mutual encouragement and recognition. But it also shows on a personal level and professional level, dedication to education and lifelong learning. That for me, it's very important. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right, and we've got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to quickly just do a plug for our ambassador program. If you want to connect to an ambassador, of which Amy and Luigi are both ambassadors, we have 30 around the world, drop me an email to this email address on your screen here, and I will be happy to match you with somebody. And now, Paul, do we have any other questions out there?
Yeah, just a couple more questions. How many times can I take the exam, and what is the cost for retake?
The retake fee is $375 US, and you can retake it 3 times.
That's correct. So there are a total of 3 exam attempts per application, and there is a 30-day waiting period before you can retest. What is the first-time pass rate?
That fluctuates. We are in a testing window, so people are taking the exam every day, but it tends to be between 70 and 80%.
Excellent. I have attended events in the past, but don't necessarily have records for those events. What do you recommend?
I would recommend that if you know who the event organizer was, to go back to them and say, I went to this conference in 2017. Do you have a registration record? I mean, most people can give you that payment record, so just connect back with them. Another thing that can really jog your memory is your calendar. So if you look at your Outlook calendar, or your calendar on your phone, that might also show you if you were inputting there the days that you were at trainings and things.
Great. So one question, and this is a great one. Can I include classes from another certification program as part of my CFRE application?
Yes. And Paul, do you want to talk a little bit more to that?
Yeah, so you can definitely include other education, whether it's through another certification program or just any sort of general professional development. But again, if you're taking another certification program, if you're applying to that and you have fundraising education that's related to that program, you can certainly include it in your application for CFRE. Also up to 10 hours of non-fundraising education if it's a non-fundraising certification. And I have one more question. Does volunteering at a church, school, library, etc. qualify as service learning?
Yes, it does.
That's right. So any general volunteering, you can list as general volunteer service. That does count towards your education requirement. Volunteer leadership would be considered anytime you serve on a board or a committee. So there are two distinct options for service learning. It's general volunteer service and volunteer leadership.
Very good.
And that's all the questions I have.
Excellent. Well, we're just at time, so I want to thank everybody again for joining us. Keep an eye on your email. We will shortly be sending you a link to the recording as well as to the slides. So thanks again, and we look forward to welcoming everybody to the CFRE family shortly. Have a great rest of your day.